Um, Good afternoon, colleagues, and all our organized labor and all the movements that we have invited to this important session. Firstly, I want to thank all of you for having made the time to listen to this clarificatory session, which is important for us as the CCMA, and we are of the opinion it is very serious to organize labor. For the purposes of this session, allow me to explain the obvious, that the CCMA is a tripartite institution, which means that it is constituted by business or organized labor, and government. And all of those important organs sit in the governing body of the CCMA as social partners, driving the CCMA as the accounting authority in important decisions that ought to be made by the governing body. And anything, therefore, and everything that happens, we are accountable to our social partners. And today's session is made purely for accounting purposes and also to clarify some of the things that you may have read. And you may have noted also that as the CCMA, it is not our business to occupy the public discourse in the issues that have been reported in the media. And one thing I've learned about the media is that when you respond to queries and questions that they ask you, what they report, you have no control over. And we have definitely learned from this session, this period, since the presentations that we've made at the collective bargaining of COSATU, and what the media has reported afterwards, and many of which has been misrepresented. We do not find it interesting that we should go to the ombuds to report some of the misrepresentations that we have received and misrepresentations that have been reported. The reason why also we don't do that, it's because we are accountable to our stakeholders and our social partners in the things that we do. While we were busy preparing for the processes internally to report to all the necessary structures, Business Day was part of the collective bargaining conference of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, then went and reported on what they've observed at that conference. The way some of the things were reported were not entirely accurate, and it caused a panic in the media, and the story carried on. I've also noted that Business Day was also present when we made a presentation in Parliament, where I appeared on behalf of the CCMA, submitting our quarterly report, and part of that discussion involved us talking about budgetary issues. It will be wrong for me to suggest that everything that is reported in the media is incorrect. Some aspects that was reported were correct. And the purpose of this session is not to respond to media questions, but to make sure that as an important organ of the CCMA, that we properly report to you on the state of the CCMA and where we are going from here. And I hope that at the end of this session, you'll be in a position to understand what is happening, what is going to happen, and how is everything else affecting you as an important user of the CCMA and also as an important stakeholder sitting at the CCMA and also outside the CCMA. For that reason, as the CCMA, we're very grateful that you have managed to make the time so that we make sure that we are explaining very basic things that it is important for you to understand. Now, let me start first with the issue of the budget. And it seems that people have taken quite an interest in our budget and how we do things. And of course, it is understandable why, because any budget that is affecting the CCMA, any budget cut, will have a direct impact on the service that we provide. Let me confirm the following important facts. Yes, it is correct that the CCMA has sustained a budget cut in the current financial year. It is not a misrepresentation. It is correct. And the fact that it is almost 100 million rand that was taken from a budget is also correct. And that happened in different stages of the current financial year. One of the things that I just need to explain, which may appear quite obvious, is that in February this year, before the end of the previous financial year, we normally do our annual budget. It gets approved by the governing body, where the organized labor is sitting. We did not at that stage anticipate that there will be a massive budget cut that we have sustained in 2020. We had the budget that we had and operated with that budget and ensured that we also, cut certain services that will ensure that our actions and decisions that we make are within our budget. And it is important that that principle be understood for a simple reason that the CCMA is not only founded in terms of the LRA, in terms of its finances, it has to act, it has to behave, it has to decide in terms of the Public Finance Management Act. One of the things that we can't do is to spend money that we don't have. That is why then when we do the budget, we're doing it purely for that purpose, to make sure that as we account to the department that gives us money, as we account to Parliament as a structure that has oversight over the CCMA, that we have spent our money correctly. The CCMA is driven by a strategy that is regulated, that is submitted and tabled in Parliament. So our expenditure must be in line with that strategy in the execution of the broader government outcomes, which are intended to service you as the beneficiaries of that process. So that's why it's important that we respect the budget that we make. But when we have not foreseen that the budget will be cut, it is not the fault of the CCMA that is failing you. It is because we know that broadly that government has a serious fiscal pressure, and the reductions of budgets in the respective government departments and public entities, it is intended to achieve that 300 billion or so that has to be cut in order for us to remain liquid as a country. So the CCMA does understand the objective of the budget cut. It is wrongly reported elsewhere that the CCMA is opposed to budget cuts. We're not. We understand that. The only issue that we have a problem with is the timing and the extent of the budget cuts and its direct impact on the services that we provide. So that's what is important that we understand. So the 100 million rand was never planned. The 100 million rand was not expected because as at the date when we did our budget, we'd already suffered a budget cut. One of the misconceptions also that we must clarify is that budget cut only started in 2020. It's not correct. The budget cut have been there and happening for the past 3 years, and there has been cases where the staff of the CCMA, particularly management, had no salary increase because of the budget cuts, which was very specific. But there was never any noise about it. No one has ever been aggrieved about it or talked about it in the media until this year. We're not raising an issue about that. It's a matter important for noting because those are the people that provide service to you. So the 3 years has been quite steadily reducing our budget, and the rate of increase that we ought to have gotten as the institution to deal with the budget has also been reducing. We understand. And what we also understand is that it's not only about the budget cut, it's also about the increase in our caseload that we have to do. The increase in the caseload is not commensurate to the budget that we have. That's a simple fact. And I'm asking you to understand and accept that the budget that we have, even before the 100 million rand reduction, is not commensurate to the added mandate that we have to execute. We have gladly welcomed this important legislation called the Employment Equity for both the conciliations and the arbitrations. We also accepted the historic introduction of the national minimum wage in terms of the National Minimum Wage Act. That has caused an increase in our caseload. But what is unfortunate understanding, of course, the limitations that comes with it, is that there is no budget that comes with the expansion of that mandate. But the team at CCMA, from a cleaner to the case management officers, to the interpreters, to the commissioners themselves, despite all the continuous reduction in the budget of the CCMA, they have continued to deliver service to you. And I'm not just saying this for the purpose of this presentation. Our previous reporting in the previous financial years, or the past 5 years, you will see that the CCMA has performed excellently despite all these challenges that we are talking about. So I'm very grateful to be surrounded by a team that understands where they are, that understand what needs to be done, who understand the limitations of budget, but they still work around the clock to deliver and give you the service that you deserve. We have performed up to 93, 94% in our performances. We've kept very good audit reports. We've kept all of that and accounted to Parliament each and every quarter and each and every year. This institution is an institution of choice. It's an institution that boasts best service to its people that it ought to do. And to that extent, we are grateful. So we are not very ungrateful with the budget that we get, and we do understand the budget cuts that are being done. What is threatening to the CCMA, which has caused the media frenzy, is the possibility that the CCMA will have a further budget cut in the coming financial year. We anticipate a 170 million rand budget cut in 2021-2022 financial year. And we expect a further cut in 2022-2023 financial year, which is 231 million rand reduction. If you look at the totality of our budget and you account that amount of reduction, you can then see for yourself what that does to service delivery and the operation of the CCMA. So it is correct, but what is not correct is the way it is reported. In one of the reports that I've seen, it was reported that CCMA in 1 year has lost 631 that it was presented at the collective bargaining conference. That's not correct. The 600 million then is accounted for the next 3 financial years, because that's what the letter says. So somebody who's good in mathematics calculated the 3 years and made them in 1. I'm not sure that's a good calculation, but what we know for a fact is that it's not 600 million then per year. It's 600 million spread over the period of 3 years. The results of this, if executed, are devastating. We're not going to sugarcoat it, right? That's important. And we're not being arrogant about it. We're making a call to the powers that be to understand that the services will be affected severely if such a cut continues because of the mandate that we carry, because of what we do. Now, as a consequence of that, there are certain decisions that we had to make. The only one that has made a lot of noise is the one that has to do with the usage of the part-time commissioners between December this year and March next year. Is it correct that we had suspended that service or the usage of our commissioners for that period? Yes, it's correct. What is not correct is that that's the only thing that we did. It's not correct. Let's correct that. There are many measures that we have taken in order to accommodate the 100 million rand reduction that we've seen. And one of which, to give an example, we no longer have conferences at the CCMA. At this time, we would have had our Indaba starting as we did for the past decade. And we would have had our Shopshows conference already had taken place. We didn't. We would have our labor conference coming next year as we close the financial year. We're not going to have that. The number of trainings that we used to do nationwide to educate you, to empower you, we've stopped all of them. The only time we can do them is when people pay for them. It's a significant loss because it is difficult to enforce your rights and to refer cases if you do not even know you've got rights. So that has a huge impact in terms of what we are doing. So there's a host of cost-cutting measures that we've put in place to make sure that we're able to cushion the budget cuts that we're dealing with. So it is not correct, therefore, to say that the focus has just been on the part-timers. That's a misrepresentation of facts. We have, of course, taken into account on the implication of that. Here's an important fact. It is also not correct what is reported in media that CCMA operates on part-time commissioners only. It's not correct. The CCMA by law and practically, we've got part-time commissioners and we've got full-time commissioners. Because of the budgetary challenges, we've taken a decision not to employ further full-time commissioners because there is this thing called the wage cut or the wage bill cut on management that is implemented by government. So we cannot be seen to be going the opposite direction because a full-time commissioner is an employee of the CCMA. We've taken a decision, therefore, not to employ further full-time commissioners, but we did continue and will continue to recruit part-time commissioners because that's a variable cost. So the usage of part-time commissioners and full-time commissioners there's a ratio or a formula we've had for years, a 60-40 ratio, meaning that we use 60% part-time commissioners and 40% full-time commissioners. So in the period of December to January, or between December and March, we will not be using part-time commissioners other than certain exceptions. We are not going to use part-time commissioners. But it does not mean, as reported in media, that without part-time commissioners, the CCMA is closing down because there's no one doing cases. That's not correct. We have been operating as a CCMA even at level 5 lockdown. Level 1 to us did not surprise us because for us, in our phase, we've been continuing to operate and providing the service. We've been doing cases, we've been doing collective bargaining cases. I've had to get involved myself as a director to make sure we are situated level 5 together with the minister. So we've never stopped operating. The staff of the CCMA never stopped operating. What we've done was to switch to digital platforms so that we can continue to give the service. So any report that suggests that the stopping of usage of the part-time commissioners will shut down the doors of the CCMA, it's incorrect. We will continue to operate despite that challenge. But of course, we are going to make sure that we find a way to go back to normality where we can use our full complement of our commissioners, which includes both the full-time commissioners and the part-time commissioners. The engagement with the department are continuing, and I think we are going to make progress. We are making progress because it will be a misconception to think that the department and Treasury do not understand the implications of the budget cuts to the services that the CCMA provides. One of the things that as a CCMA we pride ourselves in is our involvement in assisting parties in the facilitations of large-scale dismissals. The CCMA has been achieving more than its targets when it comes to job saving, and we want to continue to save jobs because one job saved is more than enough, and one job lost is too many. So that is the conception that we have as the staff of the CCMA and the leadership to make sure that as we proceed, we get things in order. And I'm very grateful that we have done our best to achieve when it comes to those specific issues. And I hope that we will be able to deal with that accordingly as we proceed with job saving. My issue here is just to ask that that be understood in that context. Now, having said so, it brings me to a very important fact, the one that deals with the walk-ins. It has been reported that the CCMA has stopped to take cases. It's not correct. We always take cases. It's a matter of the platform. And we are here to concede that the biggest component of cases that are referred to the CCMA come from those that walk into our doors nationwide. And we were quite clear when we issued this directive, the impact that it's going to have. We were faced with two competing interests. One, providing service. On the other side, life and health of the users and also of the CCMA staff. It is also not correct, and I've seen in the media, that the CCMA has closed its offices to the walk-in of our users because we feel that the users are going to infect us. We're becoming too important. That's not correct. It's about cross-infection, meaning that the CCMA staff can infect users and users can infect CCMA. Is this theory? No. Has it happened? Yes. The infections have increased nationwide and globally, and the numbers are there for you to see. One of the problems that we've encountered is that the number of infections in the CCMA was increasing, the number of deaths, or when we started having deaths at the CCMA, it became a factor. If you note that from the period of 26 March to 10 November, we have had 139 positive cases at the CCMA. And I'm only talking about reported cases. There's a number of cases that are unreported. One of the biggest concerns that our users have raised is that if your staff and the commissioners are infected, it means therefore they are going to infect us as users. It's correct. There's a possibility that that can happen. But the converse is also correct, that our users that come to the CCMA will infect our staff too. That's why we call it cross-infections. But this is not about blameworthiness. This is not about the source of infections. It is about cross-infections. So in making a decision on whether we stick to service that we have to provide, irrespective of the rise in infections, or we just give life priority and use alternative platforms to still provide the service, we chose the latter. We then chose to close the offices to walk-ins, but continue to use digital platforms, which has saw a very good increase in our users using our digital platforms, not only for the purposes of set-downs, but for the purposes of referring cases as well. And of course, you still have others in the market who still faxing. Yes, it's an accepted method of faxing and emailing and other methods that we use. That's okay, because it depends on the resource that is available to you. So we continue to receive cases. We continue to refer matters to be referred in the different statutes. That has never stopped, still since from level 5. But we've got to protect you as the users from infection, and we've got to protect CCMA from infection. We are threatened by a second wave of infections, and we've got to play our part in ensuring that that doesn't happen. We have opened offices. We've seen long queues, but our users have breached the regulations in as far as the social distancing, the masking, and sanitization, to a point that we've been threatened to be sued because we're not complying. But it was our users who were doing so. We had to make that call. If discipline was there and we're able to manage accordingly and observing all the regulations, we would not be in this position. But we are forced in this position, and we had to give life, limb, and health priority over service. So that is the reasoning behind the users not accessing the CCMA directly using the walk-ins. There was no other reason. And of course, there are concomitant disruptions that comes with that when you open doors. For example, when an office has an infection, we have to shut down and disinfect. Then that means that all the cases of that day in that office are postponed to go back right at the back of the queue. We have had that experience, which was quite disruptive. And the closure of our offices has happened almost more than 26 times from June to November. And every time an office is closed, you can't use the office. You can't have a hearing unless you're doing it digitally. You have to disinfect and protect those that are there that have had contact with somebody who's positive in terms of COVID. This is not the decision that we make. It is a reaction that we have to make in terms of the regulations and also to protect life. Yes, cases suffer because they get postponed, and cases cannot be referred. There'll be no walk-ins. But it's a situation that has imposed itself on us. We did not just lightly make that decision because we understand that our biggest users are the ones that walked into our offices. We had to do that. We had no choice. We had to protect you. We had to protect our staff as well, so that we contain the deaths and serious infections. Because some of our staff, as I'm talking to, are sitting in hospitals. Others, even senior management who are sitting in hospitals in ICU. Others have their lungs collapsed because of COVID. More than one in one office. It's a scenario that we have to contain. We do not know what to expect to the so-called second wave. I see what's happening in Cape Town. We see what's happening in the Eastern Cape. We see the numbers in Joburg that are above 2,000 per day nationally. These are serious numbers. And these infections also include us and those that use the CCMA. So we had to take measures to make sure that we protect them. If there's any other suggestion that is available that can ensure that there's no cross-infection, but we can still allow people to walk in, welcome to make that suggestion. But that was the reasoning behind the closing of the walk-ins of the offices. Any other reason that is reported in the media is incorrect. The facts are the one that I just presented. The other issue which was reported at the bargaining council, at the collective bargaining conference of COSATU, was the one relating to the conciliations. There's a very energetic and an ambitious journalist who said that the CCMA has banned conciliations. You can't ban conciliations. We have not banned conciliations even in level 5 lockdown. We've worked through that time of the lockdowns to deliver the service on conciliations. Conciliation is a statutory requirement. And I've seen some institutions that reported that the CCMA has banned conciliation if it's unlawful. It's wrong. They're misrepresenting the facts. The CCMA has mainly three streams of conciliations that we do. The one that has taken center stage is the pre-conciliations which are done telephonically. Those ones we've had for years, and it continues during lockdown. It even continues right now. We're using our full-time commissioners to call parties and conciliate matters. And we have been very successful in telephonic conciliations without parties having to travel, without parties being exposed to being in the public transports, and without interacting with people in the public, which contributes in the prevention of infections. That you can sit at the comfort of your home. Not only can you refer a case using our app or using our internet, and you can actually deal with the case telephonically and resolve it with the commissioner over the telephone. We have been doing that. We will continue to do so. Let me give a direct response. There is no conciliation that is banned by the CCMA, period. That's the bottom line. Any report to that is not our report. What has been misreported is the meaning of cases that have not been set down that must still be conciliated. Let's explain to the uninitiated about the process of referral. Once a matter has been referred, that comes to the CCMA, the first event that must happen that the matter must be conciliated. It has happened, as we always report in Parliament, that there's a number of cases that are not conciliated as first event. And such matters proceed directly to arbitration automatically. This is where then now the journalists got it wrong, that we banned conciliation, then we move straight from referral to arbitration. That's not what we said. What we said is that for matters that have not been set down and conciliated as first event, they will continue to arbitrations. When they get to arbitration, the parties together with the commissioner must agree that they must revert to conciliations to try to refer the matter. But as you proceed to arbitration, the rule of set down for matters to be conciliated, there's a supplementary rule there that says if matters are not conciliated, 30 days past, the matter proceeds to arbitration. It does not die. So to report that the matters die because there's no conciliation, it's legally wrong. Let's correct that as well. So, in addition to that, what was submitted to the collective bargaining conference was that with the reduction of the workforce, the usage of the part-time commissioners, it means that for the cases that will not be set down for conciliation is going to increase because you do not have the resource to do so. We wish that every case that comes through is conciliated, it's set down, you allocate a commissioner. But the resources do not allow it. So therefore, those that are not conciliated, it's not the last opportunity. In fact, the history will show you that you have a much greater opportunity to resolve the matter through conciliation at arbitration stage. Those who are the regular users of the CCMA, who understand the mechanics of conciliation, especially on the component that deals with the prospect of success, you'll understand why conciliation is more successful at arbitration stage compared to the conciliation stage. So let us clear that any report that you have seen that has suggested that the CCMA has taken a decision to ban conciliations, it's incorrect, it's legally wrong. We will not risk that type of confusion, because doing that, it will cause us very serious constitutional and statutory entanglement. We want to disentangle that and put it correctly and do it rightly. I'm sure that is clarified, that you will continue to refer cases at conciliation. If we manage to conciliate it through a set down, we will proceed to do so. But if we're unable to do so, the matter will still be conciliated at arbitration. But it doesn't mean that there's a banning of the conciliations by the CCMA. I hope that clarifies that, because that's the biggest part that goes to the heart of the social justice concept that we always talk about. So we must sort that out. So the impact of not having part-time commissioners is because that now we cannot then use the numbers of the commissioners that we have in order to conciliate cases for the purposes of doing that. This also has to do with the facilitations of the Section 188A. That has not stopped. We continue to do so, but we're relying mainly on our full-time commissioners when it comes to these issues. Now, do not be surprised, therefore, as I close, do not be surprised when you see an increased number of telephone calls that the CCM makes to parties who have referred cases. It is because we are optimally using the resources that we have. I'm sure that most of us are familiar with the concept that says you can still do more with less. Yes, we have less budget, we have less resources that we can use, but we are finding ways on how we can do more with those limited resources. Some of our staff members will have to do more than what they normally do in order to ensure that we keep afloat. And we hope that this is the kind of commitment that we're going to get from you as well. And it is important, therefore, to say that we encourage our users to maximally use our digital platforms. And yes, our regulations do state that the first preference that we give is parties agreeing where they're going to hold a case. That's priority one. It's very helpful. And the second option, of course, is the digital platforms. I think there must be a positive attitude in how we look at the digitization of processes. You have to look at it from this point of view. We are at the age where you can do a case from the comfort of your home. You don't have to spend money for transport. You are safe from infections, and you're still in the house. So once the case is done, you're still at home. You can take a break, you're still at home. So from the cost point of view, it's very advantageous to you. From the health and safety point of view, it's to your advantage. From the convenience point of view, it's still to your advantage. We must also accept that when it comes to affordability, it is another factor, because the internet uses data, and those that are fortunate that have got Wi-Fi is the best case scenario, because then you can refer, you can do set downs while sitting, in the comfort of your home. This is exactly the content and scope of the fourth industrial revolution, because it is anticipating that most of the processes that we have are digital platforms. We know that that process also comes at a cost, because as I've read from Sarah Kessler in terms of the 4IR, that it is the end of a job, but it is the emergence of a different type of job. But what we need to evaluate is what is the impact of 4IR on dispute resolutions in general. And the impact of that we are already experiencing, that you can do cases digitally. This is the future. This is how the future of work is. This is how the future of work is going to be. And it has already started. It's not a plan for the future. It is what it is. So what we're asking from you is that to the extent that you can assist us to accommodate us in these new approaches that we are doing, as I've just presented to you, will be highly appreciated. To the extent that we can go beyond point of comfort to make sure that you're comfortable, that it is convenient and safe for you to do your case without compromising the dispute that you're referring, we will do so. So everything else that has been reported in the media that is outside of what I've just presented is untrue. We will, of course, welcome any questions that you are going to send to us. We will promptly respond as our unions that uses our case, because if you look at our caseload, you can imagine if all unions stop referring cases to the CCMA will not exist. We acknowledge that and we appreciate it. We will do our best to provide excellent service as we've done, because we've got an evidence that shows that we have. Thank you very much.